So it's not without a little trepidation that I'm giving this presentation today, because this is not about a program that HESI has conducted. I'm not a nutrition scientist. I haven't had a lot of experience in this area. On the other hand, I do come from a long line of Jewish mothers and I grew up in New Jersey, so I am well schooled in the practice of bragging about your family members and things that they've accomplished as if they were your own. So I'm going to draw on that historical experience and try and share this with you today. And so I do want to start by thanking Mr. Takashi Tagami, who is the director of the Center for Health Promotion in ILSI, Japan. So he has reviewed this slide set and given me his blessing to present it. And I also want to thank Susie Harris, who's the executive director of ILSI. And she has also taken a look at the material and has provided me, oh, there you are, you moved seats from yesterday, and has been really invaluable in helping me to fill in some of the blanks here as I had the opportunity to try and better learn this story myself. This is a story that, having been with ILSI myself for 15 years, I've heard bits and pieces of over time, and I've always thought it was a really remarkable tale, two tales actually that we're going to share, and we're really excited to have the opportunity to share it with all of you, because some of you know ILSI very, very well. Sam Cohen is the recent ILSI president. Alan Bubis is the current ILSI president. Others of you probably have a very vague notion that there's this other entity of ILSI that does something about food and they operate other places in the world, but who are they and what do they do? So this, I think, is one of the real highlights of what that organization has done historically, and so it's a thrill to present it to you. I'm going to do my best. I've told Susie to feel free to stand up and holler when I get things wrong, and others of you who know better, please do so. So all of you know the HESI organization, the areas that we work in: drug safety and in environmental science and in food safety, through publications, through workshops, through symposia around the world. So you know that picture of HESI and you got a good flavor for it yesterday. But really, there's a lot more to the ILSI organization, and it really is, we talk about translational science and applied science. This is about as applied as you can get. And so what I'd like to do is share really the remarkable science from basic research truly to application that was conducted during these programs. So it's a little bit hard to see here, but just to give you a visual of how the organization is structured. So ILSI is the parent organization. That was the founding organization in 1978. Since that time, the organization has grown organically, and HESI was established in '89, as you know, as a global branch, primarily to focus on, initially they were thinking really more environmental science, a little bit of chemicals, a little bit of pharmaceuticals. And additionally, over time, let's see if I get this right. There we go. We have all the regional branches, and there's 15 now, Susie? 16 regional branches. So it's hard to see here, but we've got branches in ILSI Europe, ILSI Brazil, ILSI Argentina, ILSI Japan, ILSI Southeast Asia, Taiwan. So regional branches all over the world that are very small, but do focused programs. So HESI and ILSI, ILSI itself we describe often as a federation. So it's a federation of associated entities that work together towards a common mission, but don't always work hand in glove on every single activity, but we share a common goal and objectives. The Research Foundation is also a global component of the organization, and their executive director, Morgan McLean, is here with us today, was here yesterday, and they also share in the organization's mission of building science and moving it into application, as well as helping to develop capacity globally. So this story really starts with ILSI's Center for Health Promotion, which, without going into a long, complicated history organizationally, started when Alex Malaspina, the founder of the organization, instituted it down in Atlanta, kind of in in concert with his retirement from the DC office. So this started as a program focusing on how do we engage and really have an on-the-ground effect on the health status of children, of families, of individuals, and it was started out of an office in Atlanta with some initial seed funding from the Robert Woodruff Foundation. One of the key players in the initiation of this program and some of its objectives was Mr. Tagami, who I referred to earlier, who moved then from working in the Atlanta area to being instituted at the ILSI Japan office. And the ILSI Japan Center for Health Promotion was really started there, and he has led the program from that site for the last decade plus. So this is what I'll be talking about today is an ILSI program, but it has primarily been driven out of the ILSI Center for Health Promotion located in ILSI, Japan. However, as I will touch on, there are certainly other branches, including our focal point in China, which is essentially our China branch that has had some strong engagement in this program as well. So the goals of this program were to enhance health and nutrition by moving research into application. And this is something that we talk about in HESI all the time, perhaps not so much the nutrition piece, but certainly enhancing health by this phrase of moving research into application. And the first project I'd like to talk about is one that they've termed Project IDEA. So it's Iron Deficiency Elimination Action. So just by way of context, iron deficiency anemia is a huge problem globally. So some 30% of the world's population, and I'm sure Dr. Voss can speak to this much more knowledgeably and eloquently than I can, suffer from this ailment. So while many populations, women, children, are at risk, particularly it is an area that impacts ability to work, ability to thrive, and because of the regional distribution of iron deficiency anemia, it has also become yet another hurdle in the struggle against poverty. This is a graphic from the WHO, and while it may be a little bit hard to see, I think the important message is it's really red, and the darker red, the higher percentage of the population that's suffering from iron deficiency anemia, and the darkest red is severe at greater than 42% of the population. So this is a significant and significantly global problem. So what I'd like to talk about is what ILSI has done to try and address this problem. And they have used the model that we all use and pride ourselves on in the organization, which is bridging academia, government, and industry. So we're going to kind of walk through the process that they undertook here. So the first step in trying to tackle this problem was to identify some target regions where they could implement programs that would likely have a significant impact, and for which they also pragmatically had connections and resources that they could help apply to that problem. So there were a series of locations: Vietnam, Philippines, Cambodia, India, and China. They weren't all launched at the same time. This is probably not even the right order, and I'm primarily going to focus on the programs in Vietnam. But these were the regions that were targeted for the IDEA program by the ILSI CHP. Part of this was, as I said, recognizing who your partners might be. So some key partners in helping to move this program forward were the National Institute of Nutrition in Vietnam, which is this group up here. There were active partnerships along the way with the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and focal point in China, which is the ILSI China office, essentially. One of the things that I find so remarkable about the way this process worked was that ILSI really played a significant role in everything from start to finish. So the first piece that they helped to implement and to facilitate was the development of critical science to address this issue. So a number of studies were published and were helped to drive them along through the CHP, looking specifically at iron absorption of sodium-iron EDTA. So these studies compared ferrous sulfate, is that right? Iron sulfate with sodium-iron EDTA to look at the relative uptake and bioavailability of iron in those two forms. What they found was that while there wasn't significant difference in the bioavailability of the iron in those two forms, the iron sulfate form caused a precipitate when you put it into a number of foods, like a soy sauce, for example, and people don't like that. That's not very palatable, that's not very appealing. So the science moved forward to demonstrate that sodium iron EDTA was a highly bioavailable form of iron that could be used as a supplement in foods, that it would enhance iron uptake in the populations that were consuming foods with that form of sodium iron EDTA. So once they had established that this was an opportunity to create a supplement, an iron-based supplement that was usable in food products, that was created a bioavailable source of iron for the consumers, they began looking at what were the appropriate products in these regions in which could be supplemented in order to enhance access to iron. So because this is all primarily taking place in Asia and Southeast Asia, they targeted products that were consumed on a regular basis. And one of the things that Susie pointed out to me, which is common knowledge to those who are in the fortification and nutrition area, but something I really honestly hadn't thought about, was it's not just about putting it in a food. It's about putting it in a food that's going to be eaten routinely and at about the same level every day. Because think about the toxicity potential. You don't want a food that somebody might eat a ton of one day and not eat again for 3 weeks. You want something people are going to consume at a relatively steady level, continuously throughout week after week, month after month. So the products that were identified here were fish sauce, soy sauce, and rice, as 3 products that were staples of cuisine. They were often eaten with many, if not all, meals, and they're eaten at a relatively constant level by children and adults. Another piece that I found fascinating was this program wasn't just about developing small-scale epidemiology studies or clinical trial studies or looking at the uptake of iron, but they actually used the expertise from the industry that was partnering with this program to work with local packaging and testing facilities to look at what does it take to actually introduce, for example, the sodium iron EDTA form fish sauce or soy sauce. What does that mean for packaging? For example, one of the things they found was that it was important to put I think it was the fish sauce in a brown paper wrapper to avoid sunlight, which could cause it some discoloration when you added the supplement. So this was another element of partnership that the ILSI group helped to facilitate, was bringing in the packaging and producing facilities to make sure that this was actually implementable in a commercial and accessible way. Another piece of this was, again, making sure the product was palatable. So if you're going to add this nutrient for fortification, you want to make sure you're not altering the flavor and the taste of the product. And the ILSI offices conducted a number of small-scale trials where they worked with the community, and they shared these products to make sure that they tasted okay, that people would continue to use them. These also involve small-scale studies where they tested, pre and post tested the iron levels in the population that was involved in these studies to really see if there was a measurable impact. And they found that it was very positively received. One of the interesting anecdotes that Susie shared with me was that one of the challenges that I wouldn't have anticipated was that a number of the soy sauce manufacturers were hesitant to do this, not because they didn't support the public health outcome, but they treated it almost as if you were going to a fine winemaker and saying, well, we appreciate you've got this lovely vintage here, but we just want to add some extra ingredients in here. We promise it won't affect it. But they have a great deal of pride and propriety around those compositions, about the formulations that they use. They weren't so excited about dropping in some sodium iron EDTA into the soy sauce blend that they've been making for hundreds of years. So that was another challenge that had to be worked through that you might not think about from a nutrition standpoint. So now we have built up a situation where they have conducted research on the basic science of uptake of iron through the sodium iron EDTA supplement form. They have worked with manufacturers to get it into the process in both fish sauce and in soy sauce. Fish sauce was primarily in Vietnam. They have worked with local populations to ensure that there was that these were palatable and acceptable products that people would be interested in using. They had also worked on ensuring that they actually saw some benefit, and they did in these small-scale studies. So then they had really the whole proof of concept and commercial package put together, and that meant the need for national launches and partners. And this is the piece, again, that the opportunity that ILSI sees here and was able to capitalize on with regard to taking this from a proof of concept study and a small-scale study to implementing these things at national levels, I think is really a remarkable achievement. So this required partnership with the governments. So this was the National Institute of Nutrition in Vietnam, the China CDC, other governmental partners, as well as industry partners and academics, to build awareness of these programs, to build community awareness of the importance of iron fortification and the value that it brings from a health status standpoint. So those were important pieces. Another key partner here was GAIN, which is a foundation, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. And GAIN played an interesting role in that the sodium iron EDTA component, while it's highly bioavailable, you really only need a relatively small amount to compare to some other forms of iron fortification. It's relatively expensive to make it food grade, and there weren't a lot of commercial producers of this. So that meant that the soy sauce companies or the fish sauce companies that wanted to add this to their products, A, either couldn't find where to get it, or B, had to pay a pretty high price to get it. GAIN stepped in and actually worked with some of the manufacturers of the sodium iron EDTA to make it food grade in the first place and make it accessible and available to the manufacturers. So this was a key element that made this process not only scientifically valid but feasible from a commercial standpoint. Another interesting piece just to add here is that at least in Vietnam, in part because of the working in partnership with this program, recognizing the health value of this, there are now standards that require fortification, the iron fortified forms of these fish sauce to be provided at a certain level in the marketplace. And so this is something that now has become part of the national program. What's really exciting is that this is not only a product development or a fortification success story, but it's really a public health success story. So the data that we're able, or that the ILSI CHP program is able to report, is that they've now provided 600,000 families, children, parents with access to iron fortified fish sauce in Vietnam, and that they have demonstrated measured decreases in anemia in young children in Philippine and Cambodia study groups where they have just really begun implementing these programs. They have been successful in implementing both the soy sauce fortification and recently as well fortified cereal programs in China. And overall, the program has estimated that they have impacted more than 50 million at-risk individuals by providing access to these fortified soy and fish sauce products in particular. So really a tremendously successful program that has shown how one organization in partnership with other entities can build the science, can build the pragmatic and implementation aspects, and then can move it forward in a way that actually allows the public to benefit from a health status standpoint. So that's one of two. The second example is in relation to access to clean water. So most of you are probably aware, and you may remember our speaker last year who spoke, Jason Clay, thank you, who spoke extensively about the role of clean water in ensuring both quality environments but also health status. And globally, there's some 2,000 people that die daily from diarrheal disease from poor drinking water. And it is actually the fourth leading cause of child death. Most of those causes are related to diarrhea. And actually, I think Martin and I were talking last night, and we were talking about, I think, the prevalence of allergy in India. And he said it's not really an issue because you're much more likely to suffer from a diarrheal illness that's going to cause a serious reaction or serious illness, morbidity, than worrying about allergenicity. And 750 million people worldwide lack access to clean water. So again, ILSI taking on an issue that is not without stakeholders here. So this again is an example of where ILSI has brought together government, academia, and industry to address the problem, and in this case, additionally has done a tremendous job of bringing in the local community in a way that really helped and was, I think, really a linchpin in making this particular program successful. It's hard to see the Vietnam up there, but there's a little Vietnam up there, and they have one of my favorite logos that I've ever seen for Project Swan here. And the project is called Swan. I can't tell you what the language underneath, I don't know, Susie, do you know what that says?
No, I don't.
Or what it means?
No, it's Vietnamese for what Swan is.
Okay. So there you go. And the Swan program has really three components, and they describe it as information, education, and communication as their kind of three tenets for the program. And what they've done is look at three tiers at which to apply all of those aspects. So the first tier being at home, sort of with the community and the local population, the other at the water treatment facility, and the other are really more broadly across the community or the village. And this program took place in Vietnam at 3 project sites. And these are the 3 cities, and these are very rural villages. And just to give you an overview of what they did in this program, there were really so many components, all very grassroots. The first component was an educational piece where they work with children in schools, they work with families, with child care providers in the home to explain the importance of sanitation, food washing and food preparation, best practices, the importance and the role of clean water in protecting health for families and children. And you can see up here an example of some of the booklets that they provided, as well as, in this case, this is actually training other local trainers, so helping to develop expertise within the knowledge and other voices who can carry that message forth about the importance of clean water, and particularly how you ensure that at a home level in terms of practices that you undertake in the home that can help ensure that the children, from a food preparation standpoint, from a water sourcing standpoint, are doing the best they can. The other element that they brought into this was a testing and infrastructure. So this figure on the left here, these women here, it's a little hard to see, but this is actually a home water quality testing kit. So they actually provided, I don't know what percentage, but some percentage of these local homes with a kit so they could actually do some testing and have some ownership themselves of what the water quality is that they were receiving. And this becomes an important element, I think, in this program where it started with education, and then it resulted in demand by the population for clean water. So it wasn't entirely a push, it ultimately became a pull by the population asking for these services. So in addition to working on sanitation and practices with regard to how water was handled in the home, they also worked closely with the water management facilities. So this meant that in conjunction with the local governments and with other experts, they sat down and they looked at the water treatment facilities. So these are a couple pictures I pulled from some of the CHP's materials. So this one, it's a little hard to see. This was one demonstrating a sort of real lack of aeration capacity initially, and then after work with this program and investment by the funders, a significantly greater aeration at that particular facility. This one here, I'm really not entirely sure what that is. It kind of looks like a piece of cloth or something tied over a pipe that perhaps was the initial filtration system. And this here is an activated carbon, much more contemporary and much more effective filtration system. So some of it was physical infrastructure that they applied at these treatment facilities. But they also worked to train the operators of these facilities. So what does it really mean to operate this effectively? What should you be testing for? Here's the testing kits that allow you to test for some basic contaminants in the water system to help to understand how they can more optimally do the job they needed to do. So as I said, to me, one of the interesting pieces was the way that this program managed to flip from we're going to come in and tell you how to do this better and just provide resources, to creating a community that recognized the importance of this, began to understand why the link between water quality and their health and sustainability, and how they began asking then and demanding. So actually, through a water metering program that was implemented here, the communities actually had to pay a tax for their water use. So this created a financial system that allowed for funding to go back into the water management facilities to help ensure that the infrastructure that had been implemented would be retained, and that people recognized that there was some value there, and that was associated with health, with resources, and something that could be made more sustainable. So this is a figure from one of the CHP documents that gives a sense of the scale of the program. And so we talked about a little bit about the community-based program, integrating with the Water Management Union, the education piece of it, working with the technical water treatment facilities, and in the first case, implementing it, affecting close to 11,000 people, and as they moved into a second level of development, again in partnership with the National Institute of Nutrition, with the Japan International Cooperation Agency, they were able to impact close to 110,000 people. And so this program really was a great success, again, as well, in terms of providing access to clean water for hundreds of thousands of individuals. And not only did it provide clean water, it provided more water. So the overall volume of water coming out of these facilities increased by, I don't know if I have the number in here, but it was a significant percentage of actual just water flow, in this case clean water, but water flow through the facilities. So just the overall efficiency of the system was increased, as well as the quality of the water that came through the system. So this is some of the data from Mr. Tagami in terms of the impact. So these are 3 of the villages where they did it. And you can see here that when you look at the blue and the green are just different villages, but this is the baseline here, and this is first evaluation, second evaluation. So kind of left to right is pre and post. But this is looking at the prevalence of diarrhea among the children. And even if you can't see the absolute numbers, you can see that these are real significant drops. So that there's nothing theoretical about this program. It had some really significant and very pragmatic impacts on the population and the health of the children and families that live there. So my final comments in closing were just to share some things that I learned. Well, I learned a lot because this was all very much new to me, but some lessons learned that I took away in kind of looking at the work that they'd done and the process that they had undertaken, and some pieces that I think that maybe we can draw, even though we're not likely as HESI to implement this same kind of programs, are thoughts around these topics. So the first one was on sustainability. So as these programs evolved, they began to think about not only how do we initiate this project, but how do we build advocates for the project, how do we build demand for these activities, how do we build resources, how do we integrate partners that are going to allow this to continue to sustain going forward. And I will say that these programs, some of them are going to go forward continuously, very vigorously. Others are really looking for new, the project idea, I think, is looking for some new funders to keep it moving. The aspect of lateral and vertical integration in these programs I thought was particularly remarkable as well, in the sense that it didn't focus on just one aspect of the science or one aspect of implementation. They really took the whole process from beginning to end, particularly in the IDEA example, and worked the science, worked the partnerships, worked the facilitation across all both lateral and vertical aspects of these problems. Another aspect that I think is important to highlight is that these programs have evolved. So over time, they have gone from small proof of concept studies to programs that have built partnerships with larger foundations, and they've recognized, as we do in pertinent to Misty's talk yesterday, that at some point you can kind of grow up the programs to the point you can grow them, and then it becomes necessary, if they're really going to have a broad-scale impact, that you pass them off and that you have the confidence and ability to recognize at what point do you need to transition something to a federal government or to a much, much larger set of funding bodies or management bodies. So I think that's something that these programs have done. I think they wrestle with it still a little bit. Some of these are a bit in transition right now as to where that flip point is, but I think that's something that we recognize as a challenge and an opportunity with these kinds of programs. And then the final piece that I found compelling from these was around the community role, and it was a key element in both the Project IDEA and Project Swan, and not just a push out, we're going to tell you what to do or educate you as the community, but it was really an engagement of the community in the process of implementation, in the process of acceptance, in the process of teaching their peers and building demand for quality and for recognition of health, and then making that something that they didn't just wait to come, but really asked for and demanded. And I think that that's a really critical element of these programs and something that may not be recognized, but certainly shouldn't be undervalued. So this is possibly an incomplete list, but this was the best we could identify for now of some of the partners of these two programs. A little bit hard to read up here, but it's a mix of government agencies, companies, foundations, ILSI offices, individual scientists, and the funding bodies, the partners in these have fluxed over time. Most of these programs have been taking place for at least the last 15 years or so. So it has been a fluid situation, but these are some of the key partners. And again, this is my representation of their programs. So I hope that I have done them justice. But if you do have specific questions about these projects and initiatives, you should feel free to contact Mr. Tagami. I'm sure he would be happy to answer this. I know if you're interested in participating, I know particularly for Project IDEA and for Swan, actually, they are looking for ways to continue to move these and grow these and evolve these to build on the successes that they have had. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out to him. Susie Harris, the ILSI Executive Director, is here. She's been part of these programs for many years and can answer lots of questions as well. So I hope what I have been able to do is give you a picture of ILSI that's a little bit different, a little bit broader than we sometimes think about in the HESI context, and that you will continue to be part of this broad organization and will perhaps find opportunities to engage in programs not only within HESI but in other parts of the organization, because there really is some remarkable work that's ongoing. Thank you. Yeah, Myrtle.
Hi, Syril. Great presentation. I know that you mentioned in other contexts that we were trying to reach out to foundations and other types of organizations, what we classically term as government, and et cetera. So I know that there are a few organizations that, oh, thank you. Okay.
It's on.
Okay. I know there are a few organizations that have also put their footprint in the clean water perspective, and I was just wondering if ILSI has reached out to any of those organizations, some of them with high profile, Hollywood type approaches,
right.
They claim that they're in the space. I'm just wondering if that's an additional opportunity that's being explored.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe Susie wants to answer that question. I know that there has been some outreach and opportunity or discussions about how and when to engage them. This has been a pretty regionally focused program, and that was when we met as ILSI back in January. Was it this past January? Mr. Tagami gave a presentation on this, and that was one of the questions everybody said, this is a fabulous program. How do we flip it? How do we translate it to other regions, to other parts of the world, to a bigger scale? And I don't know, Susie, is there anything you want to add in terms of whether that's something that is actively part of the plan going forward?
Yes, we're certainly looking for additional natural resources. One of the challenges is ownership. Who's going to get the glory if there's glory to be given? Mr. Kidani is a wonderful human being, and he's interested in helping people. And so moving this particular project, Swan, out of Asia into Africa or into Latin America, we haven't been successful in doing that because we haven't found the right group with which to work who would allow the approach that ILSI is used to taking. So we're still working on that. There's still lots to do.
Thanks.
Other comments? Martin, can you have a microphone?
So frequently, each of these modular programs focus on one part of the overall ecology of a water system. How are ILSI working either upstream or downstream to make sure that the water is safe? So for instance, that lovely picture of the young girls with water vessels on their head. Frequently, sanitation of those water vessels is the failure point, and you get beautiful, clean water into a biofilm-laden pot.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, and Susie should jump in if I get this wrong, but my understanding with the Swan program that there was a fair amount of effort on education generally on sanitation practices, so cleaning food preparation vessels, separating raw food from raw meats from vegetables. So I think that was a component of the program. Certainly that's something that has its boundaries in terms of how extensively that is implemented, but that was part of the educational component that was built into this program. Tim, and then.
Is this on the ILSI website? Is the story available?
So there are certainly, there's material on the ILSI CHP website that gives a flavor for some of the work that's done here. Takes a little bit of digging, but there's some reports there that you can pull up. As I said, this was kind of my capture of things that I saw and read from multiple sources and publications, and I think maybe we've been a little bashful as an organization about being really proud of this story, because I think it's, I often talk about the things that I could easily communicate, back to the grade school example yesterday, that I could easily communicate to my daughter's class, and they would say, wow, that's really great science, that's a great story. This is a really relatable story. It's easy to tell. It's harder to talk about, whether you're have a marker that designates proximal tubular damage doesn't resonate as well with a group of 7th graders. I'm sorry, Ernie. But this is a story that's very relatable. It's relatively easy to tell at a high level. So information is there. Could it be better? Perhaps.
As a group, my company and I've worked with before has been Engineers Without Borders, who've also moved ahead on a lot of water treatment projects in the developing world. Has there been kind of a connection with more of the engineering community who have been going more into, particularly I see a lot of young engineers in my company have participating in voluntary programs going to Africa, Latin America, and developing water systems for villages. Also, they actually have little kits and also their own little stories on what types of treatment systems are appropriate for different types of conditions. So there are other kinds of, how do you corral all the different kinds of resources kind of going out there and doing this is a real challenge.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And my understanding is that they certainly work with the local water engineering community, and they did bring in some experts. I think most of the experts actually came in from Japan, is that right? So it was relatively regionally focused, given who was running the program, per Susie's comments earlier. So that is potentially an opportunity going forward to bring in other kinds of expertise. And I think if this program were to get to the point with the right partner where it could leverage in other countries and other continents, that's the kind of opportunity that could help to augment that.
Terry?
Yeah, one might have anticipated that these kinds of impactful initiatives would be, say, within the realm of the World Health Organization. I'm kind of curious in terms of what kind of assistance and or perhaps antagonism exists in these kinds of initiatives.
Yeah. So I'm going to probably punt that question to Susie. I don't think WHO has actually been an active partner in this. She's shaking her head no. Okay, yeah, I didn't think they were actually an active partner in this program. So the funding that came really was from this foundation initially that helped to seed it, and then working in large part with some funding out of one of the Japan International Development Agency. So I don't think that this is something that we have engaged with WHO on or have particularly highlighted as a opportunity for partnership with them. Is that right?
We've told them about it many times. The unwillingness to work with industry has not been helpful.
Best intentions.
And WHO is a rather poor partner. They don't have money to invest.
Yeah, we know that.
And organizations like that would typically better targets.
Yeah.
Right?
So Syril, going back to the iron deficiency fortification project, you know, it was good to see that there's this, I guess it was called the GAIN partner that provided the sodium, iron, BTA. So is that a long-term commitment? Because the question that I had is, you know, what is the cost associated with this fortification, and whether that cost is going to be passed on to consumers? And we're talking about people, you know, that are really poor.
Yeah, and that cost, I don't know the exact economics. Some portion of that cost was passed on to the consumer. So these were a higher priced product, and that is one of the challenges here, which is why the opportunity to make any kind of government regulation in the marketplace that requires manufacturers to provide it, and then everybody's kind of on the same footing is important. There apparently were some issues with, kind of potential for competitive advantage or potential for cheating. So people are raising the cost of their product but not actually adding the supplement, and then they're just pocketing the difference. It was an issue in some circumstances. My understanding with GAIN is that it was a limited investment, and that has closed out or is closing out. Is that right?
I think they're still willing to invest. The hope is that the product will, if we get lots of use for it, lots of demand for it, the cost of producing it, food grade, will decline. And that is a barrier that is having to be overcome.
But I think what is interesting to hear is that now they have the choice of buying the fortified versus the non-fortified.
In some places, not in others.
How would you allocate this? I mean, there's an education component of the importance of, you know, if you can afford it, spend the extra money.
And there was a significant education component in the IDEA program as well. And I didn't show, there's a number of images of posters and flyers and ad campaigns and other things that they did to try and emphasize the importance of this product and the value of the fortified product from a health perspective. So that community communication was an element of that as well, to try and help raise awareness in the population about why this is an important thing to select in the product.
It strikes me that you need to be talking to the global fast-moving consumer goods companies in this space. As a former employee of one of them, it aligns perfectly with everything they're about in the developing world. Would certainly assist with overcoming the costs of the material from the food substance, from the water perspective, from the home care, cleaning. It's exactly what they're doing in Rugby's price, not only reducing the volume of water required, but producing products that can clean your pots for minimal cost and such like things. So, I don't know whether you are.
I mean, a lot of some of the initial seed money and some of the initial energy behind this came from those organizations. So while they're not part of HESI for a large part, a lot of those huge food companies are major parts of the ILSI organization. So they're well aware of this program. A number of them were engaged in these programs. And on the water side, also one of the largest consumer good beverage companies was involved in helping to initiate and help build connections on that, on the packaging side, and working with plants and using expertise that way. So that connection certainly was in place. And everybody's struggling financially, and then there's the opportunity to do good, and then there's what budget is available. But those connections are there, and something the organization continues to try and work through. Thanks.